The first time I've ever heard about the 47-year Iran war was like this year. Like, we don't teach about the 47-year war with Iran in school. Like, it's insulting to actual conflicts that we've been involved in.
That you have no idea what the Iranians have done to us for 47 years.
How many Americans have they killed on U.S. soil in 47 years in the war that we've
had killed?
And I think it was just last week, President Trump said, you know, my biggest fear is being Herbert Hoover. I do not want to be the guy who crashes the U.S. stock market. And Iran has studied that, and what they've learned is the playbook is, it's a really nice stock market you've got there. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it.
They gave us intelligence to help us keep our president from being assassinated.
I think we need to focus on our intelligence, though, because our intelligence, if we listen to our intelligence, maybe we should start listening to our own intelligence, because not listening to our own intelligence agencies is how we got into this war. Our intelligence agencies assessed that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. 2 weeks ago, we said we were going to strike Iran. And you know what they did? They said, oh, okay, if you do that, we're going to treat Elon Musk's Starlink infrastructure in the region as military assets, since Starlink helps the U.S. military. And we didn't go through with the strikes. You want to know why? Because SpaceX's IPO was scheduled for 2 days later. Like, there's no military solution to this conflict. Iran has figured out that this is a stock market war.
What happens when a political movement that has spent years debating intelligence agencies suddenly finds itself confronted with an intelligence assessment that supports its own narrative? Beat. That's exactly the tension at the center of this debate. If you believe democracy depends on accountability, evidence, and honest debate, hit that subscribe button. Let's build the strongest community for thoughtful political discussion online. In this clip, a CNN panel dives into reports that Israeli intelligence believes there was an Iranian plot targeting Donald Trump. But instead of producing instant agreement, the conversation quickly becomes something much bigger. It turns into a debate over credibility, consistency, and whether intelligence should be trusted only when it reinforces our existing beliefs. Here's what that really exposes. Caroline Sunshine doesn't simply defend the assessment at face value. She raises questions about it, and in the process challenges Scott Jennings over which intelligence Americans were expected to trust in the first place. Pause. Listen closely. This is the tell. The argument stops being about one intelligence report and starts becoming about standards. Are we applying the same standard every time, or does that standard shift depending on who benefits politically? Because facts still matter, even when they're inconvenient. And in a democracy, consistency matters just as much. If intelligence deserves careful scrutiny, it should receive careful scrutiny regardless of which party stands to gain. If it's persuasive, it should be because the evidence holds up, not because it happens to align with our politics. This exchange raises exactly those questions, and that's why it's worth watching from beginning to end. Let's watch the full clip, and afterward, I'll break down the key moments, the strongest arguments, and what I think this debate really reveals.
Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Breaking news tonight, an escalation from Iran. Sources tell CNN that Israel has warned the United States of a new Iranian plot to assassinate President Trump. Some American officials suggested that the Israeli report could be an effort to sway Trump as he weighs whether to intensify his posture in Iran. But it does come after days of crowds of Iranians calling for Trump's death during the funeral for the slain supreme leader. At the NATO summit yesterday, Trump appeared to reference some of the threats against him.
They want to take out the U.S. leader, me. I'm on every list. I saw things this morning. I'm on every single one of their lists.
I may be gone too, because I'm their number one target. It's out all over the place. I'm their number one because they're scum.
It's the latest development that raises the question, is President Trump back to square one with Iran? This week, he said the 60-day memorandum of understanding was, quote, over. Both sides have exchanged strikes in the region. Traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has slowed significantly again. And now sources tell CNN that mediators in the region are working to get the U.S. and Iran back to the negotiating table, a last-ditch effort to salvage what they can from the ceasefire agreement. Now, remember, that agreement just laid the groundwork to start talking about Iran's nuclear ambitions and what would happen to their enriched uranium. The gap between the United States and its stated goals, and any chance of achieving them right now appears to be getting wider. Joining us now in our fifth seat is Max Boot. He's a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. But before we begin and open it up here at the table, you are invited to join the conversation and the debate. Go to cnn.com/Abby. You can weigh in there. We'll get to some of your comments throughout the show. But Max, taking all of this into consideration, what seems to be the increased belligerence from Iran as a result of this funeral, after this funeral, the MOU seems to be dead in the water, and perhaps a real threat that Iran is actually actively plotting to kill Trump again. What do you make of it?
What I make of it, Abby, is that the Iran war has not really ended. I mean, remember when President Trump started this foolhardy and unnecessary war of choice at the end of February, he said it would be a war that would last about 4 to 5 weeks. And here we are about 5 months later, and unfortunately, the war is still continuing. I mean, I'm not sure that we're going to see a return to a full-blown set of hostilities, because I don't think Trump wants that, especially ahead of the midterm elections. He doesn't need gasoline prices to spike once again, especially with the U.S. petroleum reserve at its lowest level since 1983. I don't think the Iranians necessarily want a full-blown war either, because they still have a lot of damage to repair from the previous round of hostilities. But it's clear that the Iranians do want to control the Strait of Hormuz. They do want to make sure that 20% of the world's oil basically flows through their hands, which was not the case when Trump started this war. But now, since the war started, they've discovered that they have this weapon of economic destruction at their hands, and they don't want to relinquish it. And oh, by the way, Trump is still not accomplishing his goal of eradicating the Iranian nuclear program. So it's a mess. But what I foresee happening, Abby, is we're likely to be in this period of low-level hostilities where it's not quite full-blown peace, not quite full-blown war, but kind of alternating between periods of hostility and peacemaking. But again, I don't see us making much progress towards Trump's goal of ending the Iranian nuclear program.
I mean, to that point, this was 20-something days ago. This is J.D. Vance talking about what he predicted would be a complete change in the posture of Iran as a result of this MOU. Listen.
The coolest thing about the progress we've made over the last few weeks is that you see people within the Iranian system, senior leadership, even IRGC officials say, you know what? We may have some animosity, we may have some mistrust, but we recognize the way that we've done business with the United States for 47 years is a mistake. Let's try something else.
You know, Caroline, there was really nothing at the time that suggested that he was correct. Certainly nothing in the MOU. In the MOU, it doesn't even address any concrete things about the nuclear program, Iran's support for terror in the region. So were they just hoodwinked?
Well, I think we know now why J.D. Vance was sent out to go sell the MOU. And at the time, Marco Rubio was nowhere to be found. Like, if you remember, J.D. Vance was doing interview after interview after interview, going out and selling this deal. And Marco Rubio was like, what, DJing a wedding still or something? Like, he was nowhere to be found because, as we've now seen, Vance, I think, was set up to be, the fall guy for this. I think we can all agree that if Iran were to assassinate President Trump, that would be wrong, because it is wrong to assassinate leaders of sovereign nations, which is why we should have never assassinated the Ayatollah and replaced him with a younger version. But I don't think Iran wants to assassinate President Trump, because if they were to do that, that would create a rally around the flag effect for this war in the United States that we have not seen yet, and would almost 100% guarantee that the United States has no choice but to launch a full-on ground invasion of Iran, which is the one thing Iran does not want. They have figured out what we have not figured out, which is that this is an economic war. Okay, this war does not have a military solution. We've exhausted all the good military options. What Iran has figured out is war is about studying your opponent. And they've studied President Trump very well. And I think it was just last week, President Trump said, my biggest fear is being Herbert Hoover. I do not want to be the guy who crashes the U.S. stock market. And Iran has studied that. And what they've learned is the playbook is, it's a really nice stock market you've got there. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it.
Yeah, he called it a risk of economic catastrophe. And Iran sees that, and they're using the leverage that they have. The Journal had an interesting take on this, which is that the MOU had this part about the Strait of Hormuz that was so poorly written that the U.S. thought that it opened up the Strait of Hormuz. But meanwhile, Iran reads it and they say, oh, actually, we control this strait. We're the ones who are going to decide who comes in and out. And now here we are.
I think it speaks to the flippant nature of the whole situation. I mean, if we're being honest, I think if most Americans are being honest with themselves, this whole crisis, this war was created as a shiny object to distract so many folks from the chaos that was around this administration at the time. And what looked to be was promised a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, is now turned into some sort of endless, unprojectable end. And it speaks to the serious nature of this. It speaks to the grave danger that not only the region, but the world sits upon. And there's really two outcomes. There's either the U.S. is going to give in to Iran, continue to give and give and give and give, or we're going to have to commit ourselves and our troops and our military to some sort of effort that is going to blow us away for extended periods of time. It's going to break a lot of people's mindsets as to what Donald Trump's true intentions are there. That's the ultimatum. There is no way to negotiate. This is a propaganda war. This is Donald Trump is using propaganda and he's propping up the markets. He's not talking to diplomats. He's not talking to generals on an hourly basis. He's talking to financial experts that are telling him when markets are closing, when markets are opening, and when PR needs to be pushed out to change the narrative.
Scott?
You seem to know exactly who Donald Trump is talking to. How do you know that?
Well, just as an American watching it play out, it certainly feels as though there's no sort of organized fashion of what's going on.
You said he's not talking to generals, that he's only talking to economic planners. I'm just asking how you know that. It just seems to be a wild assertion. I just wonder what evidence of that there is.
As a tax-paying American, I sit there and I watch this stuff play out within minutes after the markets close. I watch before markets open.
So no evidence. So here's what I think. I think we achieved a great military victory. The Iranian military is devastated. I disagree with Max. I don't think they're currently on the brink of building a nuclear weapon because they can't be because of the military victory that we have achieved.
I didn't say they were on the brink of building a nuclear weapon.
You said we haven't made any progress.
I said we have not eradicated their nuclear program like Trump said. They have 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium. They still have it.
Yeah, and it's buried beneath a significant amount of rubble.
And then they can take it out of there when they want to.
Thanks to the United States military. So that's number one. Number two.
Don't mischaracterize what I said.
After the military victory, they gave diplomacy a chance. And as the president said repeatedly, he always said, I would like to have a deal. I'm prepared for them to not behave, in which case they get nothing, and we have to go back to a military option, which is where we are today. Where it ends, I don't know. There hasn't been as much volatility in the oil market the last couple of days as some people might have projected, which is a good thing. But I do think it's true that they are not interested in rational outcomes here. And this whole threat to assassinate our president, just say one other thing, for all the people out there who've been crapping on our relationship with Israel and what we do with Israel and our alliance with Israel, they gave us intelligence to help us keep our president from being assassinated.
I think we need to focus on our intelligence, though, because our intelligence, if we listen to our intelligence, maybe we should start listening to our own intelligence, because not listening to our own intelligence agencies is how we got into this war. Our intelligence agencies assessed that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. That assessment has not changed throughout this war.
Israel also gave us intelligence telling us that the Iranian regime was about to fall, and that proved to be terribly false. I also think that there is a bigger foreign policy mess here. If you'll remember, January 3rd extricated Maduro out of Venezuela for what was supposed to be interim elections shortly afterwards. Venezuela has now been hit by 2 devastating earthquakes, and the Maduro vice president and his entire regime is still in place. They're completely incapable and inept to responding to these earthquakes. We saw this week U.S. officials, Southcom officials, greeting and hugging and meeting with the worst of the offenders, the executor of the oppression in Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello. And he couldn't, you see, so we couldn't be in Iran when 50,000 Iranians were getting slaughtered in the streets because a fourth or a third of the U.S. Navy was off the coast of Venezuela. And that now is a hot mess. The woman who gave him the peace prize, she's not even allowed back in her country. And there is nothing this administration is doing to do that. Iran is a quagmire. It feels like every other day they tell us that this is about to end, and it doesn't end. And Cuba, you got 10 million people without electricity, a grid that has completely collapsed, and a bunch of Cuban Americans in Miami wondering when the hell it's going to be their turn.
So to your point about whether this will be a quagmire, one of our viewers has a question. Where does the panel think that the U.S. will be a year from now in Iran? I mean, Max, you suggested that it's like an on-again, off-again conflict. But where does that end? Are we going to do that forever?
Well, to coin a term, Abby, it looks an awful lot like a forever war. You know, one of those forever wars that Trump was promising to end, and he just started one, and he doesn't know how to get out of it because he thought that the Iranian regime would fall within a few days, which no serious intelligence analyst, which the U.S. intelligence community, nobody really believed that. But Trump seemed to think that because Netanyahu told him that. Clearly, that's not the case. He doesn't have an exit strategy, and so we're basically stuck with this hostile regime, which is as big of a threat as ever to the rest of the region.
But if Republicans lose the House and or the Senate, can that change? Can a Democratic House and or Senate put some guardrails on Trump?
I doubt it because, you know, he has huge authority as commander in chief. He doesn't listen to Congress. I'm not sure that there's much like the only authority
for what?
The only authority he recognizes, as we were discussing earlier, is the market. So he doesn't want to do something that thanks the market.
Guardrails for what? To go back to a world where we're all rainbows and unicorns with the Iranians? They've been at war with us for 47 years.
Rainbows and unicorns.
47 years? Okay.
Nobody has been rainbows and unicorns with the Iranians.
Why didn't I learn about the 40? I'm sorry. The first time I've ever heard about the 47-year Iran war was like this year. Like, we don't teach about the 47-year war with Iran in school. Like, it's insulting to actual conflicts that we've been involved in.
That you have no idea what the Iranians have done to us for 47 years.
How many Americans have they killed on U.S. soil in 47 years in the war that we've
They have killed thousands of Americans. They have maimed American soldiers. They have attacked American allies, and they have been at war with the West ever since this regime came to power, and it is their intention to build a nuclear weapon and use it on us and use it on Israel and use it on the West. That is their intention, and they state it every day.
No, they intend to just keep using the Strait of Hormuz. They have now learned that they can behave like a nuclear power without ever needing to be one. But, okay, so, like, if we're going to keep going with this, what number of American troops are we willing to commit to keep going? And, like, what's your number? Like, how many U.S. troops are you willing to expend to achieve your objectives? And what amount of money? Because, like, we're not having that conversation. And we need to, because we've already spent $300 billion. We've already lost. Like,
what
those
amount
are
of
the
money am I
questions
willing to expend
we need to answer.
to keep
those
the
are the
American people
guardrails we're
safe
talking about
from the
with
worst
Congress.
regime in the world? A fair amount.
Okay, Iran, nobody is like, first of all, Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. They don't want a nuclear weapon. And nobody is firing a nuke at a country that has 5,000 of them. You understand? Nobody is firing a nuclear weapon,
as Max knows,
at a country that has 5,000 of them.
You're arguing that they're some sort of a rational actor here. They're irrational people. It's pretty apparent.
Oh, I think they're very. I think
one of the other things about this, Scott, I heard you earlier saying that if they don't behave well, they don't get anything. Why is this always about what they get? What about what we need to get? We need to get the uranium. Yeah. We need to get inspectors on the ground. We need to get we need Iran to stop funding terror. And it seems like there's actually no mechanism whatsoever for us to get any of those
safely navigate through the Strait of Hormuz.
And the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, that was the point of attempting diplomacy. But what they've learned is there was always a high percentage chance this was not going to work.
In the absence of diplomacy, what is the mechanism for us to get any of those things that we say we need?
In the absence of diplomacy?
Yeah. Because you're saying diplomacy is done. You're saying diplomacy is done. We're just gonna basically bomb them forever. But bombing them forever doesn't get us the nuclear material. It doesn't get us inspectors. It doesn't get us a change of their actual behavior. What does it get us?
It doesn't get us lower oil prices.
You posited that the choice was diplomacy or this. I don't know that diplomacy is done. Maybe it's not. I sort of think at the moment that it is. But number two, just like with any irrational bad actor, you have to be willing to monitor and pummel as needed. I mean, that is what will have to happen.
Sure, but again, how are we getting the things we want? That doesn't answer the question.
Well, I mean,
we can pummel them all we want, but we don't get a single thing as a result of that.
What do you mean? If we disable through military action their ability to wage war in the region or do any of the things you mentioned, that would be a good outcome.
We pummeled them at the beginning of the war.
For us? I mean, respectfully, 2 weeks ago, we said we were going to strike Iran. And you know what they did? They said, oh, okay, if you do that, we're going to treat Elon Musk's Starlink infrastructure in the region as military assets, since Starlink helps the U.S. military. And we didn't go through with the strikes. You want to know why? Because SpaceX's IPO was scheduled for 2 days later. Like, there's no military solution to this conflict. Iran has figured out that this is a stock market war. And so, I mean, they blunted our strikes. Like, you see how the chess works, right? We're the greatest fighting force in the world, but it's time to bring them home because there's not a military solution to this that doesn't involve us being over there years from now, which is what we don't want to that viewer's question.
We will leave it there. Next for us, the
I have to admit, I do enjoy a little bit of Republican on Republican disagreement every now and then. I really do. Beat. And let me tell you, waking up this morning and finding myself agreeing with Caroline Sunshine was definitely not on my trump card. Excuse the pun, but let's be real for a second. Here's why I think this exchange is so interesting. I actually found myself agreeing with parts of what both Ana Navarro and Caroline Sunshine were saying. Not because I agree with them on everything, but because they raised a question that deserves to be asked. Here's what that really exposes. If we're talking about intelligence assessments, especially on something this serious, then the standard can't simply be, believe it because it supports our side. That's not how evidence-based decision-making works. Intelligence should be questioned, tested, and scrutinized, no matter who it benefits politically. Now, look at the context surrounding this discussion. Critics of the military campaign have argued that some of the intelligence and expectations presented before U.S. involvement, particularly predictions about how quickly events might unfold inside Iran, didn't ultimately match what happened on the ground. Whether you agreed with the intervention or not, that's part of the reason some commentators are now urging caution before accepting new intelligence assessments at face value. Listen closely. This is the tell. Caroline Sunshine isn't simply rejecting one intelligence report. She's pointing to a broader issue of consistency. If previous intelligence assessments proved incomplete or overly optimistic, then surely it's reasonable to ask harder questions before embracing the next one. That's not disloyalty. That's accountability. And here's where democracy meets denial. Evidence should become more convincing because it's supported by facts, not because it comes from an ally, a preferred government, or a political figure we already trust. If the evidence is strong, it will withstand scrutiny. If it isn't, then scrutiny is exactly what it's supposed to face. That's why I found Scott Jennings' position so interesting. Throughout the discussion, he appears determined to defend the administration's broader narrative, while Caroline Sunshine keeps bringing the conversation back to the credibility of the intelligence itself. Whether you agree with her conclusion or not, she's forcing the debate onto a question that deserves an answer. What standard are we actually using to decide which intelligence we trust? Because facts still matter, even when they're inconvenient, and consistency matters just as much. If we're going to question intelligence when it challenges our political views, then we should also be willing to question it when it reinforces them. That's why I think this exchange stands out. It's less about one report and more about whether we're willing to apply the same standard every single time. But that's just my take. Let me know where you land in the comments below. Do you think Caroline Sunshine made a fair point about applying a consistent standard to intelligence? Or do you think Scott Jennings had the stronger argument? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.